You, me, and HIFMB, Stories of Science and the Sea.
Hello everybody and welcome to the next episode of the HIFMB Podcast. I'm Jan Klasdijker, a postdoc working at HIFMB, and in this episode I talked to Ravi Ranjan from India, a community ecologist. And his main forte is building models of competition. So when species interact and compete for different resources, he models that. And we talked about the history of these models and how these models moved from pretty much two species models where only two species compete to very complex models where it's like 500 of them. And Ravi has worked on various steps through this process of getting more complex. And interestingly, actually worked on blogging about COVID-19 models as well and making what they do more approachable. So actually explaining that in science communication. And Ravi is a postdoc here at HIFMB working on phytoplankton, and he has done his PhD in Michigan at Michigan State University. And also, interestingly enough, worked on snow leopards. So we talk about snow leopards, we talk about COVID-19 models, we talk about phytoplankton models, model history, maths. It's a super interesting talk, and I'll give you Ravi Ranjan. Welcome to the next episode of the HIFMB Podcast, and today I have Ravi Ranjan from India.
Thank you so much for having me. This is wonderful. I've never been on a podcast before, so this is my first time.
Perfect. So you're a community ecologist,
yes,
right?
And that is my that is my scientific identity, at least. Yeah, yeah. Uh-huh.
How did you get into that? Because I saw in your CV that you didn't start out doing that. How did you make the shift?
Right. So I really started out actually quite differently. I was doing engineering.
Yeah.
And that's where I started out. And that too, like manufacturing engineering. So trying to understand, trying to learn how to run manufacturing plants and industrial plants basically. Mm-hmm. But over time, I basically, I also had a master's degree. Together it's like an integrated program, and it was like an interesting program where you do like this bachelor's in engineering and a master's in science. Mm-hmm. And so I was doing my master's in biology and bachelor's in manufacturing engineering. But the biology part was always more appealing.
Yeah.
So
how come? Like, what is it?
So I don't know. It's engineering can be a little bit dry. It can be actually really interesting as well. But I don't know. Some of it is, I think, chance, because what you encounter at what times, and you find like a good teacher who is explaining something and then it captures your imagination. Yeah. Versus, so I think at that point I was finding engineering fairly dry, and not as intriguing. And then what happened was I ended up in doing an internship in a biology lab, and that was an empirical lab as opposed to the theoretical work that I do now.
Yeah.
But
yeah, we'll get into that in a second.
Yes. Yeah. But essentially, what happened? I was there. We were working with these mosquitoes and Aedes aegypti. And so these were real live mosquitoes. Yeah. Well, rather they're larvae. We were working with their larvae most of the time. And larvae and pupae. So just for context, these mosquitoes, we see them as adults, but of course they have three other life stages which are in the water. So there is larvae and then pupae, eggs, larvae, and then pupae. And so the question there was to try and understand like how the presence or absence of predator cues. So for example, a lot of things eat these larvae when they are in the water.
Yeah.
So there are dragonfly nymphs, there are guppies like fish and stuff like that. So, and just their presence releases probably cues, like chemical cues in the water. And we were trying to see, the grad student there was trying to see how the presence or absence of those cues, what that does to the rate at which these larvae grow. So maybe if the essential idea being if the predators are present, then maybe you want to get out of the water faster. Yeah. Right? Because safety in the air. You don't want to get eaten. But on the other hand, if you get out of the water faster, then you have you'll less time to grab nutrients from the water and grow more. So that might have sort of consequences for you later on in your life. So there's this sort of classic trade-off.
And that then captured your attention.
No, so that did. So that's the thing. So that so I really got into these this was my sort of introduction to ecology and biology, like experimental work.
Yeah.
And that really like the questions really grabbed me, not the experiments per se.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
But the questions were really interesting. So that's how I sort of got into it. And then I came back for another summer, and then eventually I decided that the experiments are not for me because
Yeah. No, for me neither.
no, it's rough.
Yes.
Half of the time they keep failing so often, and then you have to standardize all these things and do pilot experiments and this and that, and which all mad respect to people who actually do them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I cannot.
No, me neither.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So that's still a long answer to your question.
Yeah,
But-
exactly. And
yeah.
and then so the questions
Yes.
kind of captured your attention,
Yes,
and
yeah.
that's how you moved into theoretical ecology.
Yeah, basically, I decided after my second internship that I had some math training because of my engineering background, and which could be applied. And I sort of discovered this whole field of sort of people doing theoretical biology across different scales. Like people doing genetics and theoretical biology, ecology and theoretical biology, like all sorts of things.
Yeah.
So so I thought, I understand some calculus. I can maybe do something here instead. And I mean, that sort of keeps me in the realm of the question. So and it keeps me interested. I mean, keeps me working with these concepts and these ideas of, how life works. And I don't have to get my hands dirty.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yeah. In the intro, the intro to your thesis is really good and really engaging, and you really engagingly write about the history of competition and models of competition.
Yes.
If you could get into that, that'd be
Yeah.
brilliant.
Yeah, of course. So I sort of when I got into doing theory, I basically, I don't know, through a matter of accident, but I got into community ecology, which is essentially this study of communities of species living together and how they interact with each other and what that means for their abundance and things like that. And so one of the sort of primary interactions in communities across ecosystems across the world, literally any community of anything living anywhere,
Yeah.
right, is competition. And so species of different species, I mean, you can pick your favorite species, fish to plants to whatever else.
Yeah.
They're always competing for resources. So for example, a good example might be okay, so there are phytoplankton living in the sea, and they are always competing for nitrogen, phosphorus, and things like that. So people started studying communities by studying competition almost for some complicated reasons, I suppose. I don't know. But essentially, the initial idea was that people made these models, very, very simple models, called, for example, the earliest one was called the Lotka-Volterra model of competition, which essentially assumes that, you strip away a community of everything else. You imagine there are two species and there's nothing else in the world, and they're competing with each other.
Yeah.
And there is sort of, as one species grows, it has sort of a linear effect on the growth rate of the other species. So the more of species A, the less of species B. At least, so the growth rate is negatively impacted of species B. So, and that's a very sort of, it's very boiled down, I mean, of course, there's a lot of complexity in the world, but you have to start somewhere. So that's where they started. And I mean, so, to this day, actually, that model sort of remains foundational to our understanding of competition and the outcomes of competition and what we know about it. So that's where this whole field started, I think. But then eventually what happened was that some people were dissatisfied with the amount of sort of detail in the model, which makes sense because there is basically none.
Yes.
So, but so a bunch of people started making more mechanistic models. So there's this sort of traditional divide between in models. There's more mechanism versus what are called phenomenological models. So in phenomenological models, you sort of abstract away pretty much everything, and as much as you can. You focus on the bare basics, right? And that's the idea.
Like on the phenomenon.
Yes, exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
right.
So you're trying to capture the essence of competition as a phenomenon, and you're not bothered about which species it's happening in, where it is happening, what they're competing for. None of that is important. You're just like they are competing. That is what is important.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Yeah. But then people were sort of more interested in like more detail, and so like for example, one of the prominent ones is this resource competition model from David Tillman, and what he did, he adapted this economic theory to ecology, which essentially he thought of two plants or plankton for that matter.
Yeah.
And he imagined them competing for two resources like nitrogen and phosphorus. And so now he was explicitly accounting for like the details of like, for example, what they are competing for, as opposed to the Lord Covertera where they're just competing.
Yeah.
And you don't bother about what they're competing for. And then the advantage of doing that is it's a little bit more mechanism. It's a little bit more realistic.
Yeah.
And you can then make predictions about, so what happens if you have too much nitrogen, or what happens if you have a lot of phosphorus and not as much nitrogen.
Okay.
Right? And versus maybe they're balanced. And you have these scenarios that you can play with, and you can then make predictions about, so maybe if I have two species competing and I have a lot of nitrogen but not as much phosphorus, then I predict that species A will win the competition. As opposed to if you have too much phosphorus but not as much nitrogen, maybe species B will win the competition.
Yeah, right.
But then really what most people are actually interested in is the idea of coexistence, and when these two species are actually able to live with each other. So then you can try and find out some conditions on the resources. So how much nitrogen versus phosphorus is required for these two to be able to live with each other. Yeah, so that's sort of the more mechanistic, a little bit more mechanistic. And then since then, people have made, now there are like thousands and thousands of models, and but those are sort of like the milestones along the way. But now and you can now do people study networks of competition. People study with hundreds of species, and
exactly. So at that stage, we still had two species competing.
Exactly.
But your gap now that you're filling is there's multiple species.
Yeah. So it's it's funny because what happens is, you can study, so like 2 is the basic number you need for for competition to happen, right? Like you can't have competition with one species, right? So that's where everyone started, right? But then as you add more and more species, and or for that matter any sort of complexity, but as you add more and more species, the math gets more and more difficult to do, and then it gets harder to get action, sort of interesting insights out of it, right? Like some simple condition that we can intuitively understand, that becomes harder to get out of these models. So there are people who do this 1 or 2 or 3 sort of stuff, and I am usually one of them. And then there are people who do sort of more complicated stuff, with like networks and stuff. And so like you have like 100 species, and then they're looking at like, so if we take one out, does the network collapse and things like that. But I was trying to sort of I think there is this gap in between of like, you're either studying 2 or you're studying like 500. But so I was trying to sort of see what happens with the 2 species models if you take one step further, and so like study maybe 3 or 4 and how much complexity do we get in, what do we learn, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So one step forward, but not like all the way there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And is this what you're doing now, or this is what you did in your PhD?
That's what I did my PhD.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Now I am sort of more focused on actually phytoplankton, more specific to phytoplankton, and trying to look at how they will respond to, or their populations will respond to increasing temperatures and at the same time as changing nutrients.
Is that the first time working with phytoplankton, or
Working with phytoplankton is an interesting phrase for a theoretician because
right.
really, I mean, even now I'm not actually dealing with any phytoplankton in my hands. But so like at least one chapter of my thesis was sort of inspired by phytoplankton. I was working in a lab which was a phytoplankton lab.
Right.
So Chris and Lena, my supervisor, and his wife, who's also a faculty, they formed this like the theoretical empirical team of people, and their primary system is phytoplankton, and sometimes they deal with my other bacteria and stuff also. But yeah.
But to you, they're mostly just names, just species names, or what are they to you?
Oh. I mean, so far they have mostly just been species names.
Yeah, okay.
Because I am more interested in the processes than the details of the species. But I think that's changing more now that I'm here, because now I am sort of thinking more about these slightly more applied questions. So this is all like fairly fundamental stuff. And so I'm thinking about slightly more applied questions of, like, for example, climate change and things like that. And then you have to sort of think about them as real things. And because now I have to sort of get into their physiology and things like that, and grapple with, how they might change with temperature. Yeah. And so you have to think about
exactly.
real things.
Making your theory more applied.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay. And so you joined last year, right?
I joined in May last year. Yes. Yeah. End of May. Yeah.
How's it going?
It's going pretty well. It's going pretty well. Took me some time to get settled, and I mean, moving in countries in the middle of a pandemic is not fun.
Oh yes.
Do not recommend.
No. I won't do it again.
So it took some time to get paperwork sorted, and then all of that, and then I mean right after the PhD and stuff, and but now I think I've sort of settled in. So now it's the work, starting work with new people, it takes time to like find a rhythm and all of that. So now it's going well, I think.
Who's your group? Is that mainly Helmut?
So it's Bernd, who's my primary actually advisor.
Bernd
Blasius.
Blasius, yes.
Yeah. Okay. And who does mathematical modeling mostly. That's my so the theoretician.
It's your backbone.
That's my backbone, exactly. And then there is Helmut, who is the phytoplankton sort of ecologist broadly. So that's the two of, and then I also have a collaboration with someone in Geneva, Mridul Thomas, and so the three of us, well, the four of us, that's the team. Essentially.
Sweet. How did the person in Geneva get involved?
So I know him. So he did his PhD with Elena, and he's also working on similar questions. So I mean, I know him from before, and he was already talking to Helmut about some of similar questions. So there was already like this conversation already happening, and then I was looking for a postdoc project, and and then I was also interested in similar questions, so it all came together essentially.
Sweet.
Sweet. A little bit of luck.
Oh, absolutely. And probably a bit of good networking.
Yes, I mean, that always helps, of course.
Maybe to put a bit, because we've jumped around in your timeline now, maybe to put a bit of structure to this. So you're from India originally, and where exactly?
So I am from the state of Uttar Pradesh, which is translates to the northern state, and it's India's most populous state. I think this is still true. I think I'm pretty sure it's true. And it's how I like to tell people is overnight train ride away from Delhi, because Delhi is sort of something that people know. Yeah. And it's North India, and that's where I sort of grew up broadly, in the plains. Yeah.
And then for your bachelor's, you moved to Pilani.
Correct. Yeah. That is to the west and sort of closer to the desert in India. Yeah. And that's where I did my this program that I described in the beginning.
Yeah, exactly.
The master's and the bachelor's.
Yeah, the engineering
and the sciences. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
So what was your what was the master's called? The master's.
So it was just Master's of Sciences in Biological Sciences.
Okay.
So very broad.
Right.
Yeah. And then after that, I sort of moved to Bangalore, where So in India, a lot of like ecology research happens prominently in the south in Bangalore.
Yeah, that's where I know most Indian scientists from is Bangalore.
There is, I mean, now it's expanding, particularly in ecology.
Yeah.
But I think there are like several institutes in Bangalore which have a lot of ecologists and evolutionary biologists. So, so that's sort of, I mean, that was the track I was headed on. So I went there, and I was, that's also where I did my internships, actually. So,
the one with the mosquitoes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. The one with the mosquitoes. My friends still love that to this day. That I was growing mosquitoes in beakers. And this is not a thing that, any non-scientist ever dreams about doing.
Probably not, no.
Mosquitoes are meant for killing, not.
And then how did you make the
right. So I was in Bangalore, and I was that's where I did I worked for like a year with a professor there, and I did my master's thesis actually, and my university allowed me to like go elsewhere and do it if like I found someone that I really wanted to work with.
Okay.
Which I did, and that's what I did in Bangalore, and then for a whole year, and so that was the final year of my program, and then I stayed one more year after that, and to get the paper out and like start some other things, and also apply for PhDs meanwhile too.
And that's where you applied for your PhD that you got in the end, or?
Yep, that's I mean, I applied to a lot of places, but
yeah, all same.
Yes. You know how it is. Yeah.
And then Michigan, right?
Yes.
Michigan in the US?
Yes, Michigan in the US.
There must have been a bit of change in climate.
Oh boy, yes. It certainly was. I mean, it's so funny until actually Germany. So when I was in UP, when I was growing up in school, the lowest temperature would go up to like what? I don't know, like single digit Celsius. So like 4 or 5 on the coldest times.
Yeah.
Maybe. Then I went to Pilani. And then there, that's sort of closer to the desert, and it gets to like, sometimes it gets to 0, which was like a big deal at that moment. And then I went to Michigan, and then the floor just dropped by like 20 degrees.
Oh God, does it get that cold?
Yeah, it gets to like -20, -25 sometimes. It's sometimes like usually it's like around -8, -9. I think is fairly pretty standard in like January, February.
Yeah, right.
But if there's like a polar vortex, which happened when I was there once.
That sounds wild. I don't even know what that is.
It sounds.
Yeah.
It sounds like it sounds kind of like the apocalypse, right?
Yes.
The world is ending.
Yeah.
But really, I mean, I think I don't understand the physics of it, but essentially what it was, as I experienced it, was like 2 or 3 days of like a lot of very cold temperatures and a lot of snow.
Oh, okay.
And so you get snow up to like your like almost like till your knee sometimes.
Fun.
Lots of fun.
And how long did you spend in Michigan?
6 years in total. Yeah.
So maybe we should get into the difference here, because the PhDs in the US are very different from
from Europe at least. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, so basically how that works there is you go, at least, so there's a lot of variation, I should say. I'm just describing like ecology, evolution, and maybe biology in general, but and there's variation across departments and universities and this and that. But how it works there is you go in, and you have already talked to some advisor essentially from beforehand, and so you have an advisor assigned, usually in ecology at least, when you come in.
Yeah.
And then you do 1 to 2 years of coursework. And this is something I really wanted to do actually, because I didn't really have formal training in ecology, because I had one course and in my sort of broad biology thing, and I'd done some research, but I never had like taken courses in like evolutionary biology and in quantitative genetics and whatever else.
Well, that's helpful then.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. So that's sort of why I wanted to go to the US also, because so I did like 1.5 years of coursework. And then you take your comprehensive exams at some point, which is
they're just like master's exams, or
they are. I don't know what you mean by master's exams actually.
Okay.
So I'll just describe them to you, and then you can tell me what they are.
Yeah.
So how it works is you essentially there means of trying to test whether or not you are ready to do the research.
Yes.
And like that you have, or rather that you have the knowledge
Yeah.
that you need to do the research.
Oh, I see.
That's the purpose in principle of the exams. And the nature of the exam can vary depending on the department and the university and this and that. Like some people will do oral exams, committee of 4 people will grill you and ask you questions for like 2 to 3 hours.
Fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Some people will do written exams. Some people will do I had once heard of someone doing giving a student being given a field which is completely different from the research field and being asked to summarize it over a week and then come up with the most important questions and one experiment to answer how you will answer these questions. So yeah, there is variation. Yeah. Yeah, so that's, and then you take the exam, and then what I did was I did a 3-hour oral exam with my committee, and then after that I did a research proposal for my PhD and defended it basically in front of the committee.
Okay.
And then after that you do research for anywhere between 3 to 4 years.
Yeah. Okay.
And because it takes you up to 2 years to get to the exam at least.
Yeah.
Or sometimes 3.
Yeah.
And so 5 to 6 years is sort of the.
And then you also do teaching, right? In the US, it's
Yes.
always
Yeah. So you have to teach, and there is a teaching requirement.
Right.
And oftentimes a lot of people actually end up teaching a lot. And I didn't have to, but luckily enough. But essentially, so there is a requirement that you have to teach at least some amount. But that is often one of the primary sources of income for grad students.
Oh, you get paid extra?
No, well, not extra. That's the only source of income a lot of times.
Oh shit. Okay.
So okay, I should explain this better. So basically, there is typically there are broadly 3 types of income sources for a grad student in the US. If you're doing a PhD, at least one is you get a fellowship.
Okay.
And that's just a lump sum of money that someone gives to you. Sometimes it's the NSF, whatever, National Science Foundation of the US, or some private foundation. Someone is giving you X amount of money. Please take this, go do research, right? That is number 1.
Okay.
Number 2 is a research assistantship, which is essentially when your advisor or someone, really doesn't necessarily have to be your advisor, some faculty member who will get a grant that they wrote from I don't know, NSF or somewhere else.
Yeah.
And then they would employ you on that grant to work 20 hours a week on the grant.
Right. Okay.
And do research for them. So that is how that's that. And then sometimes maybe if your research is the same as that grant, then then you can just do full-time work on that, or you do 20 hours of this and 20 hours of that. That's the idea, at least.
Okay.
And then finally, there is the teaching assistantships, which is the TAs, and that's where you are assisting a professor in teaching a class, having maybe holding tutorials, helping students solve problems, grading assignments, that sort of stuff. And sometimes even taking lectures if the professor is not there, maybe, or something like that.
Yeah.
So and then you get paid for that, and that's also technically, at least, it's supposed to be 20 hours a week. And then in the other 20 hours you do research.
Okay.
So those are the 3 sort of broad.
Yeah. And which one did you have?
So I did a mixture of so I had actually a mixture of all 3, honestly, but most of the times I was an RA, which is research assistant. So I was also an international student, which makes things a little bit complicated. Yeah. Because not a lot of fellowships are available. You're not eligible for a lot of fellowships. Nothing from the US government, for example, if you are not American citizen. And then I was lucky enough that my advisor had some grant money, so that worked out. Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
And
then I taught a little bit in between.
Yeah. And do you like teaching, or?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I did. I didn't teach a whole lot, but from whatever little I did, I did like teaching. I mean, it's it's a whole different challenge. Trying to, particularly like trying to explain math to like biologists can be.
Oh yes. Oh man.
I know. I imagine you've encountered this.
From the receiving end, I'm the idiot on the other side who doesn't understand it.
I mean, it's not really your fault, really. That was like the system. How a lot of people haven't done, any math since like I don't know, high school.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah. So and suddenly you put them and you're like, okay, oh look, there's a derivative. These weird symbols and and it looks like gibberish to them.
Yeah.
And then you have to try and convince them that okay, this is actually relevant to the biology that you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. That's the biggest part. It's like as soon as I get the relevance, then it's like the door is open.
Exactly. Yeah. So that moment is very interesting to watch. That when they finally get it, I'm like, oh yeah.
And now you're doing some mentoring, right?
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. We just started actually.
Right.
With Helmut. We have a student who is collecting some data for a meta-analysis. But we just started, so I haven't really gotten into it. But yeah.
Right. Did you have to teach much maths yet, or
no. So he's not. Maybe later, but right now his project is not gonna get into that.
Okay.
So,
all right.
So far, not yet. Yeah.
Easy.
Yeah. So far, easy. Yeah.
But when did you get to the US?
2015.
15. Okay.
Yeah.
And then 6 years.
2021. I left.
Oh, and then straight into the postdoc here.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Lucky.
I know. I mean, yeah. I was applying basically all of my last year of my PhD.
Same. Yeah. Exactly.
So, and I mean, that's where I ended up.
Yeah. No, I remember when you because we have these, I guess, like open application processes where like you presented your project or your project idea to all of us.
Yes.
And we didn't get to vote, but I still remember your project. It sounded so great and like super engaging presentation. So you definitely have a hand for SciComm, science communication.
Oh, that's excellent. That's great to hear because I remember doing that presentation and I had to like pack a lot of stuff into like 15 minutes, which is
it was awesome. I loved it.
Okay,
really good. And so you have some science communication experience. You did some blog writing contest.
Oh yeah, right. That's not. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't anything big. It was just essentially at the university there was at Michigan State where I did my PhD. There was a SciComm sort of group, essentially people who were interested in SciComm and trying to promote science communication among people doing work there. So they had a blog on which they would regularly like invite people to post stuff and so that to train them essentially, right?
Yeah.
And so they had a small competition for which they were like accepting pitches. And it was about the time COVID had just hit.
Yeah.
And and then there were models everywhere.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
So many models. Suddenly everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. I remember that.
Yeah, right. And then everyone was doing projections, right?
And yes. Everybody and their dog.
Exactly. And that seems to have somehow subsided now. I don't know. It's not as this thing now.
Exactly.
Popular, but
they don't need the projections anymore.
Exactly now. So I mean, I am not an epidemiologist. I should qualify. But here's the thing. I mean, the basic models of the very basic models, at least that are used in epidemiology, are sort of fairly similar to what we use in community ecology. I mean, I wrote a small piece saying, explaining, one, what models are and sort of generally how they work and what are the caveats and how you should think about them.
Yeah.
Because I mean, if you're not familiar with any of this, and then you see like a prediction and then you're like, oh my God, this is reality.
Yeah, exactly.
It might be very, very far from reality.
I think that's super helpful though, like super valuable, especially at that time, because I remember like my friends going nuts about models and all that shit, but not understanding it, and I'm trying to explain it, but I also couldn't really describe it very well. I would have needed that piece.
Yeah, well, yeah. So that's what I was trying to do, and and I wrote I wrote a small piece.
Nice.
Talking about that and how you should deal with that. Yeah.
Perfect. So definitely one of the mathematicians who apply their knowledge and make it broadly available.
I mean, yeah, that's the hope at least. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're doing a great job of it, for sure.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
And then looking through your publication output, I've seen some super interesting stuff. So on you worked on snow leopards for a bit?
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Yes. That paper still has to come out. I mean, we still have to finish it.
Okay.
But what happened was that I was in India, and this is right before I came for my PhD, and I had more or less finished my master's thesis stuff. And my advisor then was a field ecologist primarily, and he and some lab work, but he worked with one of his areas of study was like the snow leopards in the mountains, the Himalayas essentially of India.
Yeah.
And they, I mean, that's what I think I don't quite remember now, but I think he did some of his like PhD and some maybe a postdoc. I don't remember. At some point he did work on that. But now he mostly works in the area on like the plants and like the nutrient cycles and stuff like that.
Okay.
But he's still sort of involved in that area. So we were just coming up with like a small model to because there's a classic conflict, which is the wildlife conflict, which is there everywhere where there is wildlife and there are humans.
Yeah.
Which is essentially, you have these wildlife, and then it sometimes comes into contact with humans, and it can vary from different places. So like there, what happens in the snow leopards cases, they come in. I mean, into there's a bunch of farmers who live around there, and they'll come in, and sometimes they'll eat livestock, and of course that doesn't please the farmers.
Not always, no.
So then sometimes they will, retaliate or do something like that, right? And which is not great for the snow leopard, right? And
what, basically shoot them? Or,
I think so. I don't actually remember. Yeah, I think try and like kill them somehow.
Yeah.
Or trap them. I don't know. But the idea is that, so what do you do then? Because you want to conserve, but you also don't want to, remove the people. The people are important, right? For the conservation. And so we were like trying to look at like different incentives, and at this point I don't even remember the results, but but there are different incentives that you can do, like you can pay them money for X amount of money for the livestock damage that happened, or you can sort of incentivize maybe, I don't know, fence building or something like that, so that the livestock are protected and they don't care as much. Or like you can show them that actually through like these ecological dynamics. For example, I'm trying to remember exactly what this was. So essentially, this has been a long time. Basically, the snow leopards keep in control the herbivores, and then it's like classic trophic change. So basically, snow leopards keep in control the herbivore populations, and the herbivores, which means that the plants can sort of grow more. And then there is also this loop where these snow leopards will their excreta, like they'll poop basically, and then some through the and basically all of these dynamics, when you combine them, and I don't remember the exact details of this now, but you can sort of try and show that sometimes that will actually help increase the amount of nitrogen in the soil, as opposed to when the snow leopard's not there. So which is to help make a case that maybe, and more nitrogen means better fertilizers, better soil, better agriculture, so on and so forth. So the idea was to sort of make a simple model to try and see
So all these parameters, all these parameters were in the model.
Yes, so to some extent. So basically, the model itself was just economic value of the livestock and how that impacts like sort of the farmer action, and then some basic population dynamics of the snow leopard, I think. And right, and then there was some we were trying to run the model into different scenarios where they're like, okay, what if we incentivize livestock versus what if we incentivize the wild population? So there's also the wild populations of their normal prey, by the way, which I completely forgot to talk about.
Yeah, no. I think I got that at least with like the herbivores.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So there's the natural herbivores, and then there's the livestock. Yeah. And then there is the predator, which is
perfect.
Yeah, that's the three things.
Yeah, no, we got it.
Yes. Yeah. So we were trying to see what these scenarios would entail and what would that mean for the snow leopard conservation.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So making a case for coexistence.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Sweet. But human wildlife coexistence.
Yeah. Perfect. Do you know when it comes out? The paper?
Wow. I don't know, honestly. Like we have to get back on it. It's after due to all this PhD and postdoc stuff. It's been sort of it was a side project to begin with.
Okay.
And honestly, we did I remember we did all the model analysis and all the. It's just the writing which is left, actually, and that's where it gets stuck.
Oh, right, okay.
Because I am very happy running code, but after that, someone has to have to write an introduction and discussion, and that's where I get lazy.
Okay, that's understandable though.
Yeah, but hopefully soon.
I'm looking forward to it for sure.
Yeah.
So we get we're at the 40-minute mark now.
Okay. Oh yeah.
Is there anything that we've missed? Anything you want to highlight? Anything you want to mention? As a conclusion?
I don't know. I think no. I think that we've covered pretty much everything, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sweet.
All the research and everything else.
Yep. Then thank you very much for coming here and talking to me. It's been super interesting, and to finally meet a mathematician who does who thinks broader.
Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. Yeah, of course. And this was lots of fun.
Yeah.
And,
same.
Looking forward to when this comes out.
Yes, for sure.
Yep.
Thank you. Yeah. Bye, everyone.
Want to dive deeper? Surf over to hifmb.de or follow us on Twitter at hifmb_OL.